Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. So today I have the 176 scale Churchill Mark VII tank from Airfix. So this is the standard British infantry tank, which was produced from 1941, and the Churchill had good armour, in some cases was actually better than the Tiger I armour, especially on the front, and it did have good firepower, but it didn't have a very good top speed. But it did have a really good cross-country performance. In some cases, actually, there were lines of Sherman tanks waiting to get over ditches and things, large anti-tank ditches, and the Churchill would come across and just drive straight down the ditch and straight back up the other side again, partly due to the 11 bogie suspension on the 11 wheel bogie suspension on each side. So there's 11 bogies on each side with 2 wheels on each bogie, as well as their own individual spring. So as I said, this is the Mark VII model, and the Churchill was first used in the Dieppe landings and later on at El Alamein. The Churchill was actually quite effective in Tunisia with the First Army. So the development of the Churchill led to it having up to 6 inches thick armour on a redesigned welded hull, and the Mark VII weighed up to 40 tons, but it only had a top speed of 12 miles per hour. So some people might say that this made it not a very brilliant tank, but I do quite like it because well, it's a infantry tank, so it's not meant to go out and fight on its own. It's more to advance with infantry quite slowly along with them, and essentially take the fire. Be a bigger target for the enemy rather than the infantry, and basically just advance slowly up with them. In fact, on the back of the tanks, not on these models, but on real life Churchills, they actually have a small box, I think around here, on each on the back of the tank, where an infantry officer could actually talk to the commander inside of the tank without him having to get out of his cupola, or having to get out of the turret and potentially become a target. This is because they were an infantry tank. You wouldn't find this on a Sherman or other tanks, although I'm not entirely sure if they did. Actually, I don't think they would have done. But you don't find this on other tanks because they're not made to fight alongside infantry that closely. So these were developed for an individual purpose. So I do quite like the Churchill Mark VII, so much so that I don't just have 2. I do actually have a Crocodile, Churchill Mark VII Crocodile, which I'll be doing a separate video on. And I also do have the Mark VII Bridge Layer, which is another quite impressive tank, and I will be doing a separate video on that as well. So one interesting thing about this individual Churchill is that I've actually put a infantry soldier, or I believe this is actually an American paratrooper from Airfix, but I've cut his legs off and I've put him in the turret and painted him up to make him look like he's shooting out the turret. So yeah, it's got all the markings on. I believe it says Apollo on the side there. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. So yeah, one thing interesting about this individual tank is I bought it fairly recently, and Airfix has been doing something called the Vintage Classics line. So what they've done is they've taken, I think it's the 60s moulds, I'm not entirely sure. I think it's the 60s moulds and the boxwork, the artwork from that era, and what they've done is they've just put it on the top of modern boxes. So it is just an existing box. It's just a normal box. The original flying hours and everything. It's a skill 2, so not too difficult, but I'll go over the instructions in just a second. So on the back here there's the how to paint it. Yeah, it's just a standard Airfix box. It's just that it's got the old-fashioned box art, which I think is really nice actually. And because they've released the Vintage Classics, it means that actually we've got a massive selection now compared to what we did have, which is a couple of years ago, I think, or a year ago. There was literally, or maybe actually a couple of months ago, it was literally just the Tiger I, the Sherman, and the Cromwell, and that was all the tanks that we had for a while. But now we have the Churchill, I believe the Stug, a World War One tank, I believe it's the mail tank, yeah, so, and the M3 half track, which is actually really cool because a lot of these models haven't been produced for a long time. So yeah, let's just have a look at this tank from the side. This is actually quite a large tank compared to other tanks. This is quite a large tank. Just having a drink there because I've got a sore throat. Okay, so now we'll just have a look at the instruction manual. So I think the worst part of this entire model kit is definitely the suspension. That is, you know, it's quite bad because you have to align all these individual bogies up and then put them onto the thing, and then actually put the covers on. Yeah, another thing is the tracks. They've not been improved at all. The same old terrible Airfix rubber tracks which have to heat with a soldering iron. In fact, actually, I don't do that. What I've done is on this one, as you can see, I've got a lot of spare track as armour going around the side of the turret and the front of the turret and all. Yeah, so what I've done is, instead of gluing the track all the way around, I've just cut the centre section on the inside out, cut the centre section out, I've glued it in, and then so now I have all this spare track, and it means I can have all this nice armour on the side of my tank. So yeah, moving that way, so look at the instructions. Other than, once you've got past the suspension though, the instructions are actually quite simple to follow. So I definitely would recommend this to anyone who's gonna start. Maybe not as a first model because it's quite, you know, it's quite fiddly with the suspension, but otherwise it's actually a really good model. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like.